I'm Camilla, 35, female. I live in a quiet, sunlit apartment in the city, surrounded by books and historical documents, working as an archivist for the city museum. My life has always been one of order, of carefully preserved facts and cataloged truths, a stark contrast to the loud, chaotic world of my family. I always thought my father, a titan of industry, appreciated my steady nature. But it turns out the truth of his life was far more chaotic than any of us could have imagined. His death didn't just leave a void. It detonated a bomb in the middle of our family, exposing a secret life and a betrayal that has turned my siblings into enemies and left me questioning everything I thought I knew. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. The air in my father's penthouse was always the same: cold, sterile, and smelling faintly of expensive leather and industrial-grade air freshener. It was a space designed to impress, not to comfort. We were gathered there not for a holiday or a birthday, but for the somber occasion of a post-funeral reception. My father, Robert Sterling, a man who had built a construction empire from the ground up, was gone. He had suffered a sudden, massive heart attack a week prior, leaving no time for goodbyes, only for the logistical aftermath that always follows death. My older brother, Julian, stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out over the city that had been our father's kingdom. At 39, Julian was the heir apparent, not just in title but in spirit. A venture capitalist with a jawline as sharp as his business acumen, he was already talking on his phone in hushed, urgent tones, likely discussing the market's reaction to our father's passing. He wore his grief like he wore his designer suit, impeccably tailored and for public display only. He had always been our father's favorite, the son who followed in his ruthless footsteps, and he expected the world to be handed to him on a silver platter. Now, he was expecting the Sterling estate to be that platter. Across the room, my younger sister, Isabel, was performing her own version of mourning. At 27, Isabel was an aspiring actress whose main role was playing the part of a heartbroken heiress on her social media feed. She was taking selfies, her eyes artfully tear-streaked, with captions about her beloved papa. Between takes, she'd dab her eyes, check her reflection in the darkened screen of her phone, and sigh dramatically for the benefit of our father's business associates who milled around, offering condolences that sounded more like networking pitches. She saw our father's death not as a loss, but as a storyline, one that would hopefully boost her follower count and land her a role. And then there was me, Camilla, the middle child, the quiet one, the archivist. I had never fit into their world of hostile takeovers and glamorous galas. My world was one of dusty records, of piecing together the past from faded ink and brittle paper. I loved our father, but I had never truly known him. He was a presence, a force of nature, a provider. But he wasn't a dad in the way you read about in books. He was a CEO who happened to live in the same house. I watched my siblings, one consumed by greed and the other by vanity, and felt a familiar pang of isolation. We were three islands forged from the same rock, but the tides had long since pulled us apart. The family lawyer, David Chen, a man of 55 with a calm demeanor that was a welcome anchor in the storm of my family, approached me. He had been our father's lawyer for decades, a fixture in the background of our lives. "Camilla," he said, his voice low and kind, "I'm sorry for your loss. Your father was a remarkable man." "Thank you, David," I replied, my voice feeling small in the cavernous room. "He certainly left a mark." "The reading of the will is scheduled for tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock, at my office," he informed me. "It's important that all three of you are present." Julian, his phone call finally over, strode over to us. "Of course, we'll be there, David. Just a formality, right?" Dad always said things would be split 3 ways, clean and simple. He wasn't a man for surprises. He clapped David on the shoulder, a gesture that was meant to be friendly but came off as possessive, as if he were already managing this asset too. "Robert's instructions will be made clear tomorrow," David said diplomatically, his expression unreadable. Isabel drifted over, drawn by the mention of the will. Is there any way we can get an advance? The emotional toll of this has been immense. A little retail therapy would do wonders for my grieving process. Julian shot her a look of disgust. For God's sake, Isabel, have some dignity. Dignity doesn't pay for couture morning veils, she retorted, unfazed. I just stood there, a silent observer in my own family's theater of the absurd. I had no grand expectations for the will. I assumed Julian was right. It would be a simple three-way split. I didn't need the money, not in the way they did. My job paid my bills, and my small apartment was all the space I needed. What I craved was something else entirely, something my father had never been able to give me, a sense of connection, of belonging. I hoped, foolishly perhaps, that maybe in his final words, in the legal eyes of his last will and testament, there would be a sentence, a phrase, a single word meant just for me that would explain it all. That night, I went home to my quiet apartment and felt the full weight of the loss. It wasn't the loss of a multi-millionaire patriarch, but the loss of a father I had never quite managed to reach. I fell asleep hoping that the will reading would, at the very least, bring some closure. I had no idea it was about to bring a war. The offices of Chen and Associates were the opposite of my father's penthouse. They were tasteful, understated, and comfortable. Polished wood, soft lighting, and the scent of old books and fresh coffee filled the air. It was a space designed to put people at ease, but as I sat in the leather chair in the main conference room, a knot of anxiety tightened in my stomach. Julian sat to my right, tapping his pen impatiently on the mahogany table. He had already called his office twice, barking orders about some portfolio. He radiated an aura of entitlement, as if he were merely waiting for the crown to be placed on his head. Isabel, to my left, was scrolling through her phone, likely posting about the solemn day and the burdens of inheritance. She wore a black dress that was a little too chic for a somber occasion, her expression carefully curated to look tragically beautiful. David Chen entered the room, carrying a thick, leather-bound folder. He sat at the head of the table, his face grave. "Thank you all for coming," he began. "Before I begin, I want to state that I am here merely to execute the final, legally binding wishes of your father, Robert Sterling. He was very specific in his instructions, and he signed this final version of his will just 2 months ago." Julian leaned forward. "Let's get on with it, David. We all know what it's going to say." David ignored him, opening the folder and putting on his reading glasses. He cleared his throat. "I, Robert Sterling, being of sound mind and body, do hereby declare this to be my last will and testament, revoking all prior wills and codicils." He went through the usual legal preamble, his voice a steady drone. He detailed a few minor bequests, a donation to his university alma mater, a sum for his longtime housekeeper, a vintage watch for David himself as a thank you for his years of service. My siblings shifted impatiently. This was all just the opening act for the main event. "Now," David said, pausing to look at each of us in turn, "we come to the matter of the primary estate, including all properties, liquid assets, company shares, and personal effects, valued at an estimated $87 million. Isabel's eyes widened, a genuine emotion finally breaking through her practiced facade. Julian allowed himself a small, smug smile. This was the number they had been waiting for. David took a deep breath. "To my son, Julian Sterling, I leave the sum of $1 million. The smug smile vanished from Julian's face. "What? 1 million? That's a rounding error. Is this a joke?" David continued, his voice unwavering. "To my daughter, Isabel Sterling, I leave the sum of $1 million. "1 million?" Isabel shrieked, her phone clattering onto the table. "That's it. That's an insult. I spend that on clothes in a year." "And to my daughter, Camilla Sterling," David said, his eyes meeting mine with a hint of what I thought might be sympathy. "I also leave the sum of $1 million. I was stunned into silence. $1 million was a life-changing amount of money for me, but in the context of the total estate, it was a pittance. A token, A dismissal. The room was silent for a moment, the shock sucking all the air out of it. Julian was the first to recover, his face turning a dark shade of red. "This is absurd, David. There's been a mistake, a clerical error. Our father would never do this." "There is no mistake, Julian," David said calmly. "The will is very clear." "Then where is the rest of it going?" Julian demanded, his voice rising to a shout. "The other $84 million, who gets it?" David looked down at the document in front of him. He paused, as if bracing himself for the impact of his next words. "Robert's will states the following. The entirety of the residual of my estate, all remaining assets, real property, and shares in Sterling Holdings, I leave with my deepest and most profound gratitude to Dr. Anya Sharma." The name hung in the air, a foreign object with no place to land. "Who?" Isabel asked, her brow furrowed in genuine confusion. "Who is Anya Sharma?" "I don't know any Sharma," Julian snarled, slamming his hand on the table. "Is this some charity, some foundation we've never heard of?" "No," David said softly. "Dr. Anya Sharma is a person, a private individual." I found my voice, a quiet tremor in the raging storm of my siblings' anger. "David," I asked, "who is she? What was her relationship to our father?" David Chen looked at me, and for the first time, his professional mask seemed to slip, revealing a deep-seated weariness. "The will does not specify the nature of their relationship. It only provides her name and a contact address. Your father was an intensely private man, as you know. He kept many parts of his life separate." "Separate?" Julian laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "It seems he kept an entire $84 million secret life separate. This is unacceptable. This woman, this stranger, has clearly manipulated him. An elderly, vulnerable man taken advantage of by some predator. We're going to contest this. We are going to sue her, sue you, sue whoever we need to. This will not stand." "I'll call my agent. This is a story. Heiress robbed of birthright," Isabel declared, already seeing the headlines. I just sat there, the $1 million feeling less like a gift and more like a severance package. My father hadn't just disinherited us, he had erased us. He had taken the legacy he had spent his life building and handed it to a complete stranger, offering no explanation, no context, no apology. The quiet hope I had harbored for some final, connecting message had been obliterated. In its place was a gaping wound, a question mark so large it blotted out the sun. Who was Anya Sharma, and why did my father value her more than his own children? The betrayal wasn't about the money. For me, it was about the truth. My father had died, and in his wake he had left behind a ghost, a mystery that redefined his entire life and ours. While my siblings planned their legal war, I knew my path had to be different. I didn't want to sue a stranger. I wanted to understand her. I had to know the truth. The days following the will reading were a blur of rage and confusion. Julian and Isabel were in full battle mode. Their grief, whether real or performed, was instantly replaced by a white-hot fury. Julian assembled a team of aggressive lawyers, what he called his sharks, who immediately began drafting a lawsuit to contest the will on the grounds of undue influence and lack of testamentary capacity. He claimed our father, in his final months, must have been mentally incompetent, a pawn in the hands of a master manipulator. Isabel, meanwhile, launched her offensive on the battlefield she knew best, social media. She posted a series of tearful videos, painting a picture of a predatory stranger who had preyed on her ailing, elderly father. She used hashtags like Justice for Robert and Protect Our Elders, and her followers, completely ignorant of the facts, lapped it up, flooding her comments with messages of support and outrage. She was framing herself as a victim, a dispossessed princess fighting a wicked witch. It was a disgusting, yet disturbingly effective, PR campaign. I wanted no part of their war. Their obsession with the money was nauseating. To them, the inheritance was their birthright. To me, the whole situation was a puzzle. My father, Robert Sterling, was many things, ruthless, demanding, emotionally distant, but he was not stupid or weak-willed. The idea that some woman had simply tricked him out of his fortune felt wrong. He was the man who could spot a flaw in a balance sheet from 50 paces. He could intimidate CEOs twice his size with a single stare. He was not the type to be easily duped. This meant that his decision, as shocking as it was, had been deliberate. He had chosen to give his life's work to Anya Sharma. The real question was why. David Chen had given me the address listed in the will for Dr. Sharma. It was in a quiet, leafy suburb on the other side of the state, a world away from the steel and glass of our father's life. While Julian's sharks were filing motions and Isabel was crafting her next viral post, I decided to do my own research. As an archivist, digging for information was second nature to me. I started with a simple online search for Dr. Anya Sharma. The results were immediate and illuminating. Dr. Sharma was a 58-year-old history professor at Northwood University, a small, respected liberal arts college. She specialized in early 20th century European history, specifically the art and culture of the Weimar Republic. She had published several academic books and papers, all on incredibly niche subjects. There were photos of her on the university website. A woman with kind, intelligent eyes, silver-streaked dark hair pulled back in a simple bun, and a warm, summing smile. She looked more like a friendly librarian than a cunning gold digger. There was no obvious connection. My father's interests were concrete, steel, and profit margins. He read the Wall Street Journal, not academic treatises on German expressionism. He had never, in my entire life, expressed any interest in history or art beyond their value as investments. He owned a few famous paintings, but he spoke of them in terms of their appreciating value, not their beauty or historical significance. I called Julian to share what I'd found. "She's a history professor, Julian," I said over the phone. "She's an academic. It doesn't fit the profile of a predator." "Are you kidding me, Camilla?" he scoffed. "It's the perfect cover. The quiet, intellectual type, preying on his loneliness, filling his head with nonsense until he's putty in her hands. The sharks say it's a classic case. Don't be naive. She played him, and now she's going to pay." "But what if she didn't?" I pressed. "What if there's a real reason? Don't you want to know what it is?" "I know the reason," he snapped. "The reason is $84 million. That's all the motive anyone needs. Now, are you with us or against us? The lawyers need a united front. A statement from all three children would be powerful." "I'm not signing anything until I know more," I said firmly. "Fine, be a conscientious objector. But when we win and the estate is rightfully ours, don't come asking for your full share," he threatened, before hanging up. I then made the mistake of calling Isabel. "A professor," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "How dreadfully boring. She probably trapped him with long, tedious conversations. Poor Papa must have been bored into submission. Anyway, I have to go. I'm meeting with a producer from a reality show. They think our story has major potential for a limited series." Isn't that exciting? It was clear I was on my own. My siblings saw a simple, black-and-white story of theft. I saw a complex, layered mystery. My father had not been an open book, but I knew his signature. It was one of precision and intent. His will was not a mistake. It was a message. And I was the only one who seemed interested in deciphering it. That evening, I sat in my apartment, the $1 million from the will now officially in my bank account. It felt like blood money. I looked at the picture of Dr. Anya Sharma on my computer screen. She looked serene, thoughtful. This was the woman my father had chosen over his own family. The woman who now held the keys to his empire and, more importantly, the key to understanding the last years of his life. My siblings could have their war. They could fight over the money in courtrooms and on social media. I was going to fight for the truth. My quest wouldn't involve lawyers or hashtags. It would involve a trip to a quiet suburb, a knock on a stranger's door, and a search for the story that my father had died before he could tell. My work as an archivist had taught me one fundamental truth: every life leaves a paper trail. People think their secrets are safe, locked away in their minds, but secrets have a way of seeping out, of leaving faint imprints on receipts, letters, bank statements, and photographs. You just have to know where to look. I decided to start my investigation not with Dr. Sharma, but with my father. Confronting her without any information would be pointless. I needed to understand the context of their connection first. The keys to my father's penthouse, which David Chen had given me, felt heavy in my pocket. I had never willingly spent much time there, but now it was the primary scene of my investigation. I let myself into the vast, silent apartment. Without my father's formidable presence, the place felt like a museum exhibit, the life of a wealthy man. I bypassed the living room and the kitchen and went straight to his home office. It was, like the rest of the penthouse, impeccably neat. The desk was clear except for a computer, a phone, and a single, perfectly aligned stack of papers. I sat in his large leather chair, which still smelled faintly of his cologne. For a moment, I felt like a trespasser, but then I remembered the cold dismissal in the will and my hesitation vanished. I had a right to know. The papers on his desk were all business-related. Contracts, proposals, market analyses, nothing personal. I turned to his computer. It was, of course, password-protected. I tried the obvious ones, his birthday, my mother's name, Sterling one. Nothing. Julian had probably already tried to hack it and failed. Frustrated, I leaned back in the chair and surveyed the room. The office was lined with built-in bookshelves. One side was filled with books on business, economics, and architecture, the expected library of Robert Sterling. But the other side was different. It held books that seemed completely out of place. There were dozens of volumes on Europe. Ian history, art history, and biographies of artists from the early 20th century. I pulled one out. It was a dense academic book on the Bauhaus movement. Tucked inside the front cover was a receipt from a small, independent bookstore near Northwood University, dated 3 months ago. My heart started beating faster. This was it, a breadcrumb. I went through the books one by one. Many of them had similar receipts tucked inside. Some had passages underlined, with neat, precise notes written in the margins in my father's familiar handwriting. He wasn't just buying these books, he was studying them. He was engaging with the material, with the very subjects that Dr. Anya Sharma was an expert in. Then, in a biography of the artist Wassily Kandinsky, I found something else. It was a postcard. The front was a print of one of Kandinsky's abstract paintings. The back had a short, handwritten note. "Robert," it read, "this one made me think of our conversation about color and emotion. I hope it brings a moment of brightness to your day. A. A for Anya." The handwriting was elegant and flowing. The message was simple, personal, and warm. It was not the note of a predator grooming her mark. It was the note of a friend. My search became more frantic. I opened every drawer in his desk, his filing cabinets. In a locked drawer at the bottom of a cabinet, one I had to pry open with a letter opener, I found what I was looking for. It was a box. Not a metal safe box, but a simple, wooden box, the kind you might buy at a craft store. Inside were letters, dozens of them. They were bundled together with a simple ribbon. Some were in my father's handwriting, copies he must have kept, and others were in Anya's elegant script. I sat on the floor and began to read. The letters told a story that began 5 years ago. My father had attended a fundraising dinner for the State Museum, one of his rare cultural outings, usually done for networking purposes. Dr. Anya Sharma had been the guest speaker. Her topic was art as a witness, how German Expressionism chronicled a society's collapse. According to my father's first letter, he had been captivated. He wrote that her lecture had opened a door in a house I thought I knew. He had approached her afterward, and they had talked for over an hour. This led to an email, then another, and then a regular correspondence. They wrote about everything: art, history, philosophy, music. He confessed to her his secret, lifelong regret, that he had been forced to abandon his own passion for history to take over the family construction business after his father's early death. He had wanted to be a professor, a historian like her. Anya, in turn, wrote to him about her work, her students, her quiet life. She encouraged his intellectual curiosity, recommending books and documentaries. There was no talk of money, no hint of manipulation. It was a meeting of minds, a deep, intellectual friendship that had clearly blossomed into something more profound. He wrote about us, his children. Julian sees the world only in terms of profit and loss, one of his letters read. Isabel sees it as a stage for her to perform on, and Camilla is the quiet one, the keeper of stories. I think she would understand this part of me, but I have spent a lifetime building walls around myself. I don't know how to show her the man behind the facade. Tears streamed down my face as I read those words. He saw me, he understood me, and he had been too trapped, too proud, or too scared to let me in. The final letters were from the last few months of his life. After a minor health scare a year prior, he had started thinking about his legacy. "My empire feels hollow, Anya," he wrote. "I built it all, but for what? For children who value only the price tag? You have shown me that a true legacy is not what you own, but what you understand. It is the passion you nurture, the knowledge you share. That is the legacy I want to leave behind." And there it was. The reason. It wasn't an act of malice towards us. It was an act of devotion to a part of himself he had kept hidden his entire life. He wasn't giving his fortune to a stranger. He was giving it to the only person who had ever known the real Robert Sterling. He was funding his own unrealized dream through her. The money wasn't for Anya Sharma to spend on yachts and diamonds. It was to support her work, her research, her university, to build a legacy of knowledge, not of concrete. I sat on the floor of my father's office for hours, the letters spread around me. The anger I had felt was gone, replaced by a profound and aching sadness. A sadness for the father I never knew, for the conversations we never had, and for the walls that had stood between us. My siblings were wrong. This wasn't a crime. It was a love story. A story of two worlds colliding, of a man finding a kindred spirit late in life. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that I could not let Julian and Isabel destroy it. Armed with the truth, I felt a shift inside me. The timid, observant archivist was gone, replaced by a woman with a clear and urgent purpose. I had to protect my father's final wish. Not just the will, but the sentiment behind it, the tribute to his secret, intellectual life. My first call was to David Chen. I asked him to meet me for coffee, away from his office and the prying ears of my family. I laid out the box of letters on the small table between us. "You knew," I said, my voice steady. "You knew about their relationship." David looked at the letters, his expression softening. He nodded slowly. "I didn't know the full extent of it, but yes, I knew they were close. Robert spoke of her with a warmth I had never heard him use for anyone else. He told me she was his intellectual partner. When he came to me 2 months ago to change the will, he was calm, rational, and absolutely resolute. There was no undue influence, Camilla. It was the most deliberate, thought-out decision I have ever seen him make." "Then you'll fight Julian's lawsuit?" I asked. "With everything I have," he confirmed. "Legally, the will is ironclad, but Julian is trying to win in the court of public opinion to paint a picture of a feeble old man and a scheming woman. That can sway a judge, no matter how strong the will is." "Isabel's social media campaign isn't helping," I said, sighing. "Exactly," David agreed. "She's creating a narrative. We need a counter-narrative. We need the truth." He looked at the letters. "This helps. This is the proof of his state of mind. But the best witness would be Dr. Sharma herself." "I don't want to drag her into a public spectacle," I said. "She seems like a private person. This is the last thing she would want." "She may not have a choice," David said grimly. "Julian's lawyers will subpoena her. It's better if we approach her first to prepare her." He was right. The battle lines were drawn. On one side were Julian and Isabel, with their team of sharks and their social media army, fighting for money. On the other side was me, David Chen, and a box of letters, fighting for the truth. My next step was to confront my siblings. I called a family meeting at the penthouse, telling them it was urgent. They arrived together, looking smug, assuming I had finally come to my senses and agreed to join their lawsuit. "So, you're finally ready to see reason," Julian said as he walked in. not even bothering with a hello. "I've found something you need to see," I said, my voice devoid of warmth. I had laid out copies of the most poignant letters on the large dining table. Isabel picked one up, her brow furrowed. "What is this? Poetry?" she asked with a sneer. "It's Dad's handwriting," Julian said, his eyes narrowing as he began to read. I watched them as they moved around the table, reading the intimate thoughts of the father they thought they knew. I saw their expressions shift from arrogance to confusion, and then to a flicker of something else, disbelief, maybe even hurt. Julian looked up at me, his face pale. "Where did you get these?" "In his office, in a locked drawer," I replied. He wanted to be a historian. He was in love with art, with ideas. He was in love with her, not romantically, perhaps, but with her mind. She was the only one who knew him. "This is ridiculous," Isabel said, tossing a letter down. She clearly manipulated him, wrote these things to get on his good side. It's all part of her act. But her voice lacked its usual conviction. Even she couldn't deny the authenticity of our father's handwriting, his words. "Read the one where he talks about us," I said, my voice hardening. "Read the one where he calls you a man who only understands profit and you a woman who only sees a stage. He didn't disinherit us because he was manipulated. He disinherited us because he was disappointed." That hit its mark. Julian recoiled as if struck. Isabel's eyes welled up with real tears for the first time. "So what's your plan, Camilla?" Julian asked, his voice low and dangerous. "Are you going to use these against us in court, side with the woman who stole our legacy?" "It wasn't our legacy to begin with," I shot back. "It was his, and this was his choice. I'm not going to let you trample all over it. I am not joining your lawsuit. In fact, I will testify against you if I have to. I will show these letters to the judge. I will tell the world the truth." The room was thick with tension. The three of us stood there, no longer siblings, but adversaries in a war over a man we had all known differently. "You're making a huge mistake," Julian said, his voice cold as ice. "You're choosing a complete stranger over your own family." "No," I said, looking him straight in the eye. "I'm choosing Dad. For the first time, I'm choosing to honor the man he actually was, not the man you wanted him to be." Julian and Isabel left without another word, slamming the door behind. Indeed, I was alone again in the silent penthouse, but this time I didn't feel isolated. I felt strong. I had made a promise to the memory of the father I'd found in those letters. A quiet promise that I would protect his final, most personal, act. My next step was clear. I had to go and meet Dr. Anya Sharma. The drive to Northwood was peaceful. The urban sprawl of the city gave way to rolling hills and tree-lined streets. Anya Sharma's house was a modest, charming bungalow painted a soft blue with a wild, colorful garden in the front yard. It was the antithesis of my father's sterile penthouse. It felt like a home. I took a deep breath and knocked on the door. After a moment, it opened, and there she was. Dr. Anya Sharma looked just like her university photo, perhaps a little older, with fine lines of wisdom and humor around her eyes. She wore simple trousers and a cardigan, and she looked at me with open curiosity, not suspicion. "Yes," she asked, her voice gentle. "Dr. Sharma, my name is Camilla Sterling. I'm Robert Sterling's daughter." Her expression shifted instantly, a wave of complex emotions passing over her face, surprise, recognition, and a deep, profound sadness. "Oh," she said softly. "Oh, my dear, please come in." She led me into a living room filled with books, art, and comfortable-looking furniture. A cat was curled up on an armchair, and the room smelled of old paper and tea. She offered me a seat and went to the kitchen to prepare some. "I am so deeply sorry for your loss," she said when she returned, handing me a steaming mug. "Your father was a truly extraordinary man." "He was," I agreed, "and it seems I didn't really know him at all, not the real him." I looked at her directly. "I found your letters." Anya's eyes widened slightly, and she sat down opposite me. She didn't seem alarmed, just resigned. "He kept them. I told him to burn them. He was so insistent on his privacy." He kept them in a locked box, I explained. I think he wanted them to be found. Maybe he wanted me to find them. We sat in silence for a moment, the unspoken story of my father hanging in the air between us. My siblings are suing, I told her. They're contesting the will. They're painting a very ugly picture of you and of him. Anya sighed, a weary sound. I expected as much. David Chen warned me it might happen. I never wanted the money, you know. When Robert first told me what he planned to do, I begged him not to. I told him it would destroy his family. What did he say? I asked, leaning forward. He said, she recalled, a faint, sad smile on her lips, "My family is already destroyed, Anya. They just don't know it yet." He said the money had become a poison. He wanted his legacy to be something clean, something that would grow and contribute to the world, not something that would be fought over and squandered. She explained that my father had already anonymously donated millions to her university's history department over the past few years. The inheritance was meant to be the capstone, the endowment of a new wing for the humanities, to be named the Robert Sterling Center for Historical Inquiry. It was also to fund a scholarship for underprivileged students wanting to study history. He wanted to give other young people the chance he never had, she said, her eyes glistening. The will wasn't about rewarding me. It was about fulfilling his own dream through the institution that represents it. I am merely the executor of that dream, its steward. Everything clicked into place. It was so simple, so beautiful, and so utterly in character for the secret man I had discovered in the letters. The lawsuit, I began. I have no interest in fighting, she said quietly. If they want the money that badly, perhaps the court should give it to them. It would be a tragedy, a desecration of Robert's memory, but I will not be dragged through the mud. I will not have our friendship, which was the most precious and unexpected gift of my life, turned into a tawdry tabloid spectacle. No, I said, my voice filled with a new fire. You won't have to. We are going to fight them, but we're going to do it on our terms. I told her my plan. It was risky, and it would mean exposing my family's greed to the world, but it was the only way to honor my father's true intentions without destroying Anya in the process. The day of the first court hearing arrived. The room was packed with reporters drawn by Isabel's social media drama. Julian and Isabel sat with their team of lawyers, looking confident and righteous. I sat on the other side of the aisle with David Chen. Dr. Sharma was not present, as we had planned. Julian's lawyer stood up and began his opening statement, painting the picture of a ruthless, manipulative academic who had sunk her claws into a lonely, senile old man. He spoke of my father's uncharacteristic behavior and diminished capacity. When it was David's turn, he stood up. Calmly, "Your Honor," he said, "the plaintiff has painted a compelling picture, a work of fiction. We, however, have the truth, and the truth is best told in the subject's own words." He submitted the letters as evidence of my father's state of mind, but that wasn't our main weapon. The plaintiff claims Robert Sterling was not of sound mind when he created this will, David continued. But we have a witness who can testify to his precise state of mind and his clear intentions for his legacy. We would like to call to the stand Ms. Camilla Sterling. A murmur went through the courtroom. Julian and Isabel stared at me in disbelief and horror. I walked to the witness stand, my heart pounding, but my resolve firm. I was sworn in. David led me through my testimony. I told the court about my father, about our family dynamics. Then, he asked me about the letters. I read key passages aloud, my voice clear and strong. I read the parts where my father spoke of his disappointment in his other children, and the part where he explained his desire for a legacy of knowledge. Then came the final question. "Ms. Sterling," David asked, "why do you, his own daughter, believe your father left the bulk of his estate to Dr. Sharma's cause?" I looked directly at the judge, then let my eyes sweep over my stunned siblings. Because my father spent his life building an empire of wealth, and in the end, he realized it had made him poor. He found a different kind of wealth in his friendship with Dr. Sharma, in the world of ideas and history. He didn't disinherit my siblings. He gave them each $1 million, a sum that could allow them to build their own lives if they chose. The rest of his estate wasn't a gift to a person, it was an investment in a dream. His dream. To contest this, Will is to disrespect the last, most honest act of his life, and I will not be a part of that. The courtroom was silent. Julian's face was ashen. Isabel was openly weeping, not for the cameras, but for real. The truth had been unveiled, not as an attack, but as a simple, undeniable fact. We had not attacked Anya Sharma, we had defended Robert Sterling, and in doing so, we had completely dismantled their case before it had even begun. The aftermath of my testimony was swift and decisive. The story was no longer greedy professor steals fortune. The headlines now read, "Daughter reveals secret life of tycoon," and "A father's final wish," a legacy of knowledge, not cash. The public narrative, which Isabel had so carefully constructed, crumbled overnight. She was exposed not as a victim, but as a greedy, entitled daughter, and her social media was flooded with criticism. Faced with the letters, my testimony, and the overwhelming shift in public opinion, Julian's lawyers advised him to drop the lawsuit. Their case was in shambles. There was no evidence of diminished capacity. In fact, the letters proved the opposite. There was no proof of undue influence. There was only proof of a deep, meaningful friendship. Continuing would only result in a humiliating public defeat and massive legal fees. A week after the hearing, they officially withdrew their complaint. Julian did not take it well. He called me, his voice trembling with a rage that had curdled into something bitter and defeated. "I hope you're happy, Camilla," he spat. "You've destroyed this family. You chose them over us." "There was nothing left to destroy, Julian," I said sadly. "And I didn't choose anyone. I chose the truth. Dad left you $1 million. That's more than enough to start something of your own, something that isn't built on his name." He hung up on me. I haven't heard from him since. Isabel's reaction was different. Her reality show deal evaporated, and her influencer career took a massive hit. For the first time in her life, she was facing real consequences, not curated ones. She came to my apartment a few weeks later, looking small and lost without her usual entourage and designer clothes. She cried, real, ragged tears this time. She admitted she had never even considered that Dad might have had a life beyond them, a world she knew nothing about. The $1 million, she confessed, terrified her, because it was the first time she would have to be responsible for her own life. Our relationship is still strained, but for the first time, there's a crack of honesty in it. Maybe, in time, it can be rebuilt. With the legal battle over, the will was executed as my father intended. The Robert Sterling Center for Historical Inquiry is now under construction at Northwood University. Anya and I serve together on the board overseeing its creation. Our friendship, forged in the crucible of my family's war, has become a quiet, steady presence in my life. We talk about my father often, sharing stories, piecing together a more complete picture of the man we both loved. Through her, I am finally getting to know him. She insisted I take a more active role than just being a board member. With my background as an archivist, I am now heading up the project to digitize and curate my father's personal papers, the letters, his notes, his hidden library, to be housed in the new center as its founding collection. My job is to preserve his true legacy. It's the most meaningful work of my life. I still live in my same apartment. I didn't change my life with the $1 million my father left me. Instead, I used a portion of it to create a small grant in my mother's name, supporting young female archivists. The rest is invested, a safety net I never had before. The money is a tool, not a definition, which is the lesson my father learned far too late. Sometimes I walk through the construction site of the new center, the air thick with the smell of fresh lumber and drying paint. I see the name etched on the cornerstone and I feel a sense of peace. My father built a massive, cold empire of steel and glass that ultimately left him feeling empty. But his final act, his real legacy, is this place, a house of knowledge, of stories, of passion. A place built not with money, but with love. He didn't get to live his dream, but in the end, he made sure it would live on without him. And in protecting it, I finally found my own place in his story.